Welcome back to Digging Deeper. Today we're talking about calls, everything you ever wanted to know about phone calls, inbound calls, outbound calls, missed calls, all the calls.
Hello and welcome to tonight's show.
Anyway, let's get going. All right, let's talk about why phone calls are so important. So we said this number is a bit skewed just by the nature of how people want us to weight their campaigns, but about 45% of all the direct leads that you receive are going to be phone calls.
That's right.
The lead to hire rate on all phone calls that you get is around 40 to 1.
Mm-hmm.
We pulled it was like 41 to 1, but it's generally around 41 to 1. 34% say that they would rather get a phone call. However, that number is greatly skewed by how dominant the answer was for younger people, that have been in the industry not a long time.
Right.
They don't answer their phones. They don't use their phones as phones. Community reference there. But like if you go all the way up to people, those more experienced drivers, anyone that has worked for more than like 10 years in the industry, they heavily skew towards wanting a phone call from recruiters over an email.
That's right.
All that lead in just to say that phone calls are really important. How you manage them, how you answer them, how good you are on the phone. It's an extremely important part of running a recruiting department. Regardless, we're talking specifically about drivers today. We may get into techs and other adjacencies, but regardless, any recruiting department, the way you manage your phone system, or not necessarily system, but how you manage your phone calls is very important.
I think the whole
Absolutely.
system.
Okay.
Yeah, and that too. Yeah, the technology behind it too. You're not wrong. You weren't wrong.
Well,
You did not correct
I
yourself.
really am. All right.
we go.
So let's start with there's essentially two types of phone calls. There's when someone calls you an inbound call, and then when you make an outbound call. Someone has raised their hand in some capacity to say they're interested, and you make an outbound call to them. So is one better than the other? Is one inherently more important than the other, would you say?
I wouldn't say either is more important. I would just want to consider the intent behind that activity. So if you've got a driver calling in, that's a lot of intent. They have taken some sort of action, see your brand, see your ad, see your job posting, and they're reaching out, calling you. I think those are the ones that you really got to focus on. You know, there's a lot of likelihood that they're going to want to hear about your job offer. They're already interested enough for them to kind of take the first step versus you having to kind of chase them a little bit. And I think that inbound is you got to have a little bit of a distinction there. And I think you got to play to that, try to get as many advantages as you can.
And one thing to add to that, and we've talked about this a bunch, is the overall lead to hire for all calls that come in is around 41 to 1.
Right. Yep.
However, if you were to limit that to what's the lead to hire to the phone calls that we answer, it cuts it in half, right?
That's right. About 55% of all the calls that we produce for our clients are answered. Now, that's going to be just a little skewed, so bear with me. That's including after hours or weekends and things like that. So we could probably refine that a little bit more and say for the calls that are produced 8 to 5 Monday through Friday, what is that call to hire ratio? And it's probably going to be even better than 20 or 22 to 1. But when about half of inbound calls are never answered, it just cuts that number in half. That's a whole lot of high intent inbound opportunity that I don't want to say gets wasted. It just doesn't get, realized by a lot of our clients, unfortunately.
All right. Well, with that in mind, let's move into this next idea. And I will warn you guys at home.
Warning.
I'm not saying we have the perfect answer on this, but we're going to kind of walk through this and discuss this. And I think the answer would be something unique to your department, somewhat. But Aaron, I'm going to kick this over to you. How would you think about balancing the amount of inbound calls that we're fielding versus the amount of outbound calls that we are making?
This comes up a lot in meetings. So I try to be empathetic because every recruiting department is different, depending on the need. as well as the size of the recruiting department, but also the size of the driver need. You know, you may have an influx a couple times a year where you're getting new trucks in, and you may need 30 or 40 drivers, and you only have staffing for 2 recruiters. You need to take a look at it. You need to prioritize. Someone needs to be available for the inbound call, while other parts of your team, it's a scheduling thing or some type of a round robin where a live person needs to be answering the call, and it doesn't need to be a receptionist that then transfers somewhere else. You see
Really
all
good
kinds
point.
of data on the abandonment rate of a transfer.
That's right.
So you need to empower whoever it is to at least capture that contact information, ask a couple questions, which isn't difficult to have a cheat sheet.
Right.
Hey, what are you interested in? What did you see that you liked? I'm just going to take down your information, and then if you don't have all the answers, somebody can call you back later, but at least I've captured something.
And enter all that information in your CRM. Whoever that person is,
Yep.
don't just let it be on a piece of paper. Don't just let it be, handed off. Like, record that.
Should my top priority be, before I worry about outbound efforts, let's make sure that we're answering as many inbound phone calls as we can.
When you come in the morning and you have leads, partial apps, and full apps from the night before, then you've got to decide, or there has to be a strategy behind, do I sit here and, look at these while the phones ring, for a couple hours until the phones die down, and then I start working on these? I don't have a great answer there. I really think it needs to be kind of splitting up your staff.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask that. Should you understand the strengths of each recruiter? Are there certain recruiters that are going to be better at making outbound calls, and are there certain recruiters who are better at fielding the inbound ones?
With a number of clients, they've said something like what you said, where they said, okay, for all of the forms that came in, just what hit the ATS that we know came in as a new lead, app, full app, whatever you want to call it. I'm just going to look at those and say, for my 3 or 4 people that I work with, who's the best?
Mm-hmm.
They seem like they're really good at outbound, that they can get someone on the phone. They send an engaging text message. They sound good. They're leaving great voicemails. They're asking all the right questions. They're good at that process. And if they are, kind of champion them. Give them, weight the distribution of inbound leads to them. And then maybe, if Aaron's better at, when a call comes in, he's great at capturing information, great at getting a full application, and the hire time is even faster for him. Well, let's reward that behavior. Not necessarily with more money, but let's kind of feed what he's better at doing. And I think even if just a little bit, even if it's for a little bit, some of the day or some of the week, you can just find some little nuance advantages for the inbound versus outbound efforts that you're doing that can kind of, again, help you fill trucks faster, improve your ratios, improve all your metrics, and potentially even maybe save you some money.
So if we were going to create the algorithm, the equation, if you will, of how you would decide like how to prioritize and where your gaps are, I think the first thing we should talk about maybe is like, you want to know how many missed calls do you have on average. Another thing you would need to know is how many calls can a recruiter handle in a week. And when we say that, I know we've given this number before, but we'll reiterate it. But I just want to clarify, when we say how many calls, that means total calls, right? That means filled inbound plus make outbound.
Well, we say leads. I don't know if there's data on how many calls specifically.
So then if we say leads, then basically outbound and inbound would all be included in that, right?
Yeah, I think you've got an inbound call or an outbound call from a form.
All leads are not created equal.
Preach.
So I guess there's a couple things. The recruiting staff, who you have, what they're good at, and then what type of lead. I think you need to look at both before you can say how many leads can somebody handle, if that makes sense. Because when the number we throw out we're talking mostly direct leads when we say how many leads can a recruiter handle.
Yeah, and I think when
What is that number?
It's 125.
125
a week is kind of the top end. So if your recruiters are
25 a day,
each getting more than 25 a day, then you could potentially you're going to end up running into some inefficiencies. But something I wanted to, I guess, to kind of put a bow on the point that we're all making here is test it. Run it for 2 weeks and just see, am I getting more full applications? Am I getting more people to processing faster, anything like that? Are any other KPIs kind of improving? And if so, then you're onto something.
You don't improve what you don't measure.
Oh, that's a good one. You don't.
I think Sun Tzu said that in The Art of War. What should you be measuring if we're talking about, because you're saying test this out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Test out all these things to see what gives you the best result. What should we be measuring know if we are improving when it comes to this realm of phone calls?
So I would want to see kind of what are my average inbound calls per day and per week. So I kind of need to make sure that that number stays static, because all my other metrics could be skewed if my inbound calls are peaking or are changing. So I need to then kind of really be looking at the ratios past that of the calls that come in for each recruiter, how many are turning into a full application or a partial application? And then what does that hiring journey look like? Are they converting into a hire, at a 7-to-1 or 13-to-1 ratio or something along those lines? And then what used to take 2 weeks to get them into orientation, is it now 10 days? Is there any positive improvement on the process? So just looking at everything that's available to be measured in an ATS, everything that's available to be measured from all your marketing partners, and are those things improving? But again, I wouldn't recommend changing everything all at once. I would change a couple of key things and then not change anything for a couple of weeks to see, did this make marketing lift or brand lift or stat KPI improvement lift type of thing? Are those improvements happening?
I mean, I've heard people doing this, identifying certain times a day where your abandonment rate's up. Typically it's lunchtime. So if you're looking at those metrics, this may sound silly, but a lot of folks are not staggering their recruiting department. Everybody gets up at 11:15 and back at 12:15 or whatever.
Yep.
So staggering the lunchtime and then staggering the hour in the morning and in the afternoon. I think there are, with some of the teams that are now maybe a work remote hybrid kind of model, you've got a couple of recruiters that get in at 7 but leave at 4, and a couple of recruiters that get in at 8 but leave at 5. I highly encourage that. And then the last piece would be, if you don't have some type of a team bonus monthly, you should. Because the best practices, we see the most successful folks, the teams are incentivized to see the little blinking light that a call is coming in and to take it and answer it and start the application, instead of saying, oh, you're assigned to John. He's on the phone. Let me send you to his voicemail.
Oh my God.
But if you have the ability and they're working as a team, and you'll get buy-in that way.
On the weekend, is it okay to just wait till Monday?
Absolutely not. I mean, there's plenty of marketing solutions that connect your brand, your ad, your job with a driver that don't come with scheduling controls.
Mm-hmm.
So there is no date or time. It is just when it starts and then when you turn it off. And job postings is the one I'm really talking about. So it could be on Indeed or Craigslist or anything like that. If that driver finds your job on a Saturday, just say it's 2:00 in the afternoon, and they want to call and talk to somebody and you're not there, I mean, they're easily going to skip over normal recruiting hours or 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. They just want to talk to somebody now. The easiest thing that I've seen that recruiting teams have done is they buy just one company recruiting cell phone, and the person on call for the weekend will just take it home with them, and they'll put it right beside their own cell phone. So while they're watching college football, there's 2 phones there, on the coffee table, and one's for work, and it's a driver is calling, and they'll take the call, and they'll do the whole recruiting pitch right there. The driver's like, holy cow, somebody answered. And then just send, I'm going to text you the application link as soon as we get off the phone. I'm on my phone right now. I can't take any information, but can you do me a favor? Just go ahead and fill out your full application. I'm going to call you back at 8:00 on Monday. And do that at 8:00 at night. There's people I see where they take the phone home that night. When they walk in the room where the recruiters sit, they just plug it in the charger right there by the door. And there's a little schedule about who's taking it home today or who's got it the coverage for the weekend. And that's just another way for those calls that would otherwise just be missed, that are just going to kind of disappear into cyberspace for you to utilize them and get some value from them.
It's funny. The driver's schedules can be 6 days a week or come home on Saturday afternoon and have to leave out Monday morning or Sunday night. But God forbid any of us have to do that.
I knew it was coming.
I think it's frustrating that, and I'm guilty of it too. Like the drivers have a hard job, and the mechanics as well.
Yep.
Money isn't everything, but if you are compensating your team with some commission every other weekend, or we have some clients that call it a hot job, or they'll get an extra $100, $200 for a hire that came over the weekend. There's some value there to answer those calls and be on call. It's typically not overwhelming, but I will say there's less competition. I bet you 80% of our clients are not fielding phone calls on the weekends. So if the data still applies that mechanic or driver is looking at 5 to 7 jobs at a time, and if they are looking on the weekend, 80% of our clients are not actively answering. So you've got a really good shot there. And then the other piece would be, I've listened to a whole lot of phone calls where ops answers after hours or dispatch answers after hours.
Processors.
It's brutal. You do not want them to answer. And then I've also seen where the phone call goes to a voicemail and the voicemail's full.
Oh, God.
Or we have, kind of a consultative meeting with the client and they're like, what is that voicemail? I don't even know what that is. Who's checking that?
What does our phone system do at 5 o'clock on a Friday?
I think if you compensate some folks to be on call on the weekends, and they'll start an application and make some extra money.
Well, are there, if someone's listening right now, watching right now, and they're like, I've only got one, and I'm not going to ask them to be on call every weekend. I'm just not. Are there other things we can put in place? Is there anything else, any other option? I mean, how would you recommend going about that?
Yeah, I would definitely say you've got to have it in your voicemail message. You've got to make sure your phone system is buttoned up, right? So I mean, and let's be honest, there are some people that they're, like you said, are watching and listening. It's them and one other person, and they can't get burned out being on call after 5 every single day or on the weekend. And they go scorched earth, kind of going down this route. You've just got to do everything you can to call those people back. So whether it's, what are you looking at your call, like your inbound call report of the people that called me, and I need to go sort of hunt down the ones that I missed. Maybe it's on Monday and there were calls on Saturday and Sunday.
Right.
Do I call those people back? Is the voicemail journey simple after hours? Is the message inviting after hours? Making sure it's not full, making sure it's cleared out. That's a part of the workflow of those two people, is to make sure that your phone system is doing the things it's supposed to do. What advantages can you get? Again, making sure it's a great message, but then also making sure that you have access to and can at least review all of the calls for you and your team if you're a smaller team.
One thing I want to talk about now is tracking and measuring calls. So I know you're very passionate about this, and we have a tool, Stratus Analyze, that is great for this. But since you're passionate about it, why don't you take it, Kyle, on the whole idea of tracking and measuring our phone calls?
Yes, I'm a huge fan of just digging into the data of inbound calls. And how many are you getting, which hour of the day, which day of the week, answered versus unanswered by hour of the day, day of the week. Just so you can make sure that, again, how we let off, there's so much high intent with an inbound call. I think if you can spend a little bit of time and find some analysis on when are you getting the most and when are you missing the most, that's kind of where you may want to start with some of the options that we're talking about today.
Can I say something too?
Depending absolutely.
On the partnership you have, we should be able to help massage that a little bit too. Not completely, but time of day, day of week on inbound phone calls, when the ads are active versus not active.
That's right. There's things that, as a good partner, to your point, that we should be doing to try to balance that. I want to get as many hires for our clients as we possibly can, but I also want to do that within a workflow that doesn't disrupt their operations. So just, making sure you're reviewing that report month by month. 'Cause I'm a firm believer that you need more than a day's worth of data to try or to review something and change something. So month by month, what's one metric we're going to try to focus on? We're going to try to answer more, and here's 1 or 2 things we're going to need to try to answer more for the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or this month or something. Okay. Then when this month's over, let's see how we do. To Aaron's point, what kind of scoreboard or incentive can we have? We're going to give $500 to everybody on our team, 3-person team. $1,500 if we can just get to this answer rate and decrease our miss rate by this much. That focusing on is an easy way. I say easy. It's a powerful way, is probably a better term, to fully and more fully utilize that inbound lead volume and the budget that you're spending for it.
We have a new thing called the call disposition report. Why don't you tell me what's in that and why that is interesting to our clients?
I equate this to a virtual assistant to anybody that's a director of recruiting, where the machine essentially is listening to all of the call between the recruiter and the driver.
Mm-hmm.
And it's similar to how Siri works, where it can take the spoken word, convert it to text, and then kind of do an action. I can tell Siri, hey, call my wife, and my phone will call her. In the same kind of vein of thinking or technology, if you will, thank you for calling recruiting. This is Aaron. Can I help you? It'll recognize that Aaron's the person that answered, and then listen to the call and what happened. What did Aaron do and say along the way? What was the result of it? And then kind of put it into buckets, if you will, so that as a director of recruiting, I can go and immediately diagnose which recruiter is doing the right thing or may have some bad habits. And it saves me a ton of time. I don't have to listen to 100 calls. I don't have to sit out there and kind of be the big brother that's just hounding them all the time. It just points me right to what I need to do. And we use it internally to say, this person's doing a great job. Here are calls you need to give the rest of your recruiters so that you can help coach them. And here's, Kyle needs some help. Oh, he's only been on the job for 2 months. It makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Let's bring in 5 or 10 of his recordings that are right here on the report. Let's listen to them together. Let's ask him how he thinks he can get better. I'll tell him how I think he can get better. And just like that, again, without having listened to 1,000 calls a month, just let the machine do it.
So that's one piece, is the mentoring side of it.
Yep.
Which we use a lot. When we're going out, and Scott Maldonado is doing his consulting work. But I think we're still early on this, and it's funny because internally we love it. It's incredibly powerful, but I'm not sure we even grasp what we have going right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I still think we need to do a better job of how we explain it to clients, because it's pretty powerful. And the fact that we have built those buckets, and the machine learning, the artificial intelligence can hear how the conversation went and then drop it in for not interested due to route, not interested due to home time. That's pretty impressive. And you can get a huge sample size without the pain of listening to hours of phone calls, because the whole not interested due to route may happen in minute 19 of the phone call. But who has time to listen to 17 or 18 and a half minutes before you're like, oh, I see what's happening with this call? To me, it's an incredible tool, not only for the mentoring piece, but you can look at big buckets to figure out, again, depends on how large your recruiting department, how large your call volume is, but what are we missing? If the drivers are saying no, why? And I have a huge sample size to say, hey, you may want to look at your route, or you may want to look at your home time, or you may benefits, whatever it is. We have all these buckets and can tell what the driver says.
And it's instant, and it's always refreshing, and it's always on.
Can either of you give me a quick anecdote of how that's played out with a client in some way where it's discovered like a bucket?
I mean, the ones I just gave you actually have happened a couple times where we've just said, hey, over the last 90 days, here's 600 phone calls that we recorded. 200 of them said they're not interested due to pay. We can listen to a sample. I just know there's 200 that have that disposition. Let's dig into that a little bit and find out more. And then, at some point you manually do have to listen to some of the calls and say, oh, he works at this carrier and they're paying this. But just to see, what are 200 of the 600, 30%, right?
33%.
33% are turning you down due to pay. Let's take a look at it. And another one was, you can ask the AI custom things to look for. Now, granted, it takes some time, but you can, and I may have brought this up before, but you can say, hey, we have this new package that we're offering, or a new route, and it's called this, Northeast Dedicated, whatever. And you can feed that to the machine and say, I want to listen to every phone call that this comes up, either from the driver who said, I saw an ad that mentions this, or the recruiter, are they pitching it? And now I've got 50 phone calls. Well, in the case that I'm giving you, we had 3 or 4 phone calls, and that was a concern that, hey, you have this route and no one's talking about it. The recruiter didn't bring it up. The drivers aren't asking about it. So again, still it was helpful.
I mean, it will tell you why drivers are saying no. And the thing, again, where I went to is what I've seen the most of, which recruiters are doing a great job and which ones need some coaching, because not all recruiters are equal. They're not all going to nail it every single time. It's kind of over time with consistency, you can see those improvements. And so it's great to see someone who didn't have a good, again, because you can kind of look at how all the calls by recruiter and where they ended up. They didn't have a good number of calls or ending in the right disposition. They didn't have the good result that I wanted. And to see that growth over time, it's pretty stinking awesome to see someone go from struggling. And the thing is, they didn't even know it. They could have been A+ in the eyes of the recruiter just because they had hires that month. But now the machine is saying, hey, Kyle has a whole bunch of hires, but it's because he's a call hog. And if I can make him even better, it's going to make everybody else better, and it's going to free up calls for the rest of the team. There's a million ways that everything improves that way. In addition to when you're looking at the recruiters, dispositions, that's one piece. But also on our end, we have the ability to look at, and this is why we created it initially, to be proactive, to look at if certain calls were dropping into buckets where wanted local. If I can see 100 phone calls that wanted local, and I can tie the phone call back to the ad that I'm running, I can look at the ad without the client telling me and say, hey, something here is not resonating. So we have the ability to change that ad before the client sees an issue, if that makes sense.
Okay. And that was Digging Deeper, episode, not sure what episode we're on, everything you ever wanted to know about phone calls. Thanks for joining.